Hello again, everyone. So we're going to start a new lesson, and in this lesson, we'll talk about data types in TypeScript. So actually, I think you're probably familiar with this topic from earlier JavaScript and different programming languages that you may know already. But in this lesson, I want to talk about the intricacies of TypeScript. So basically, when we say the data type of a variable, well, the first things that come to mind will be values such as string and number and Boolean. So let's see how these values are defined in TypeScript and how they're used. So now we first use the let keyword to define a variable. And the name we want to use after, for example, say X here. Then we put in a colon and the type that we want to specify. So we'll use string as our first example. So then we can give the value just by putting equals, or we can define it this way and give the value later. Another way to define it could be just like we do here. We first specify that we will use string data, and then we set a value. So now I'll define the variable y using the let keyword again. Then I give a number as the first value. Well, actually, by doing this, I indicate that I have defined a number variable. And if I then go and assign a string value to the variable y, here is TypeScript warning me. It tells us that you have defined variable y as a number. You cannot give a string value. And as you know, we won't see that warning in JavaScript. All right, so that's why defining this is important here. So why don't we talk about which variables we'll use? All right, so we've already seen that we can use strings and numbers here. And we can assign a Boolean value. And of course, Booleans will take a value of true or false. We can also define arrays. So for this, we can make a few different definitions. We can see them if you want to, because you know that we can use square brackets in the array definition. Of course, we can prepare a string, not just as a number, but in a list. So I want to show you another use. Now we'll type array and define the array type between the greater than and less than signs. Now here again, assuming we have prepared a series of numbers, we'll write number here. So what if I use a string expression in an array that I define as number in this way? Of course, it's going to give us a warning here because we stated that it's a number array. But if we don't want to make any definitions here, there won't be any warning, as you can see here. Cool. So there's also a tuple type that allows us to define a different data type array in TypeScript. You want to see how? All right. So now while doing the definition, we can specify that the first element in this array can be a number and the second element can be a string. And here I use number as the initial value, then a string value. So at this point, we should pay attention that the element with the index 0 is a number and the element with the index is a string. So if we move around here, then we get an error. So that's why you have to be careful at this point. All right, so we can refer to any as another data type. So sometimes there may be uncertainty about which data type to use while developing a project. So at that point, any data type comes to our rescue. And here we just determine the variable using the let keyword while defining. Then we can define as any if we want to, or if we don't specify anything here, then we can define different data types later. Just like we do here. And as you can see, we've defined this way and received no errors. But we also know that when we did type assignment, we could not give any values like this. So as the next variable type, we can refer to enum. So enum is a data type that does not have JavaScript, but it comes with TypeScript. It allows us to number in more meaningful ways. So I'll show you a small example of colors here. So we use this data type enum, and then I wrote colors, and I'm typing in a few different colors. Now, when we are going to use like the red color somewhere here, the value it returns to us will be 0 by default. So now when we define the red variable and call it here, the next value is 0. For the next color is 1. And then the next color is 2. As you can see, writing just like this makes it happen. So if I add another color in between, of course, these numbers need to change. And if we don't want to encounter that kind of situation, you do the definition this way. So here we can define the number that we want. It doesn't have to even be in line. If I want to, I can set a value like 5 for this and 3 for that. Now, where I use them, I'll see 5 or 3 as a result. Now, if you want to, we can create our JavaScript file and see how this enumeration works. And as you remember, we were doing this just by running the TSC code in terminal. And, yep, our JS file has been created. And there you can see the enum structure that we created in our TS file corresponds to the function in JS. And when we look at our other codes, the let keyword was replaced with var. So it's basically the same logic, just a few small changes. So I think that's enough for this lesson. What do you say? Now, there are a few more data types that I want to explain, but I don't want to go on too long here. We're going to talk about them in the next lesson. I'll see you then. Goodbye for now.